Hello. As you may have guessed, these talks, they're not themed in any particular order. It's just whatever turns up in a particular week that might send me off at any number of directions. And this week, I found something on Etsy, which I've never bought off before, little selling app, which I didn't think was for true antique enthusiasts like me, but I was proved sadly wrong. And it throws up the question of condition. And this is something we always look at with antiques. And antiques are old. Proper antiques are. Not all that mid-century crap. Proper antiques are old. Because of that, they have signs of wear and signs of use. And some of them can have had a rough life. And there is a question sometimes about expecting things to be in a pristine state when it's survived 200 or 300 years or longer, and how reasonable that is when you consider probably in your own homes you've got cutlery and glasses with little chips on them and a chip on the mug, and you get rid of the mug, and these things have only lasted 5 years, 10 years. And yet we expect antiques to have this sort of miracle ability to last forever. And I want to show you what I bought. It isn't perfect by any means. And there are historical reasons why it's not perfect as well, because very few of them are. But let me show you what it is first. You get sound effects with this one. I have cleaned it lightly. I haven't cleaned this bit, but we'll give it a go. Probably got the blade now. A whistle, bells, a rattle, a piece of coral. This is an 18th century, although admittedly when I saw it, the seller thought it was late 19th century, and no shame in that. I will say that these very early rattles that you see on portraits, you see a lot of portraits, go to the National Gallery, go to your local gallery, and you'll see some absolutely spoilt child in a dress, and the boys and the girls were kept in dresses in the 18th century for years, which explains quite a lot about the upper classes. And you'll see these dangling from their necks by silk cords. So firstly, it is a sort of status symbol. Secondly, with this piece of coral, this is supposed to ward off evil spirits as well as act as, I'm not going to stick that in my mouth, as a teether, although I'm not sure how robust that is. The truth is, children, particularly of the aristocracy, are incredibly stupid, and they actually used to hold them by the bit they're supposed to be chewing, and they used to chew on this bit, which is the bit that's supposed to entertain them. So this is the first thing that is imperfect about this little whistle. The bells. Rarely do these survive with all their bells intact, because the child, the loathsome child, will often attach itself to one of these bells and start chewing it. And if it's left with its rattle for too long, it will rip it off. Now, in this instance, we've got almost all. They normally come with 8 bells on them. Some of the later Victorian ones have 6, and some sort of cheap versions have 4. But normally it's this 2-tiered level of 4 and 4, so 8 bells. This one here, you can see here, we've got the remains of the wirework frame, because you have a little wirework frame that's soldered on to hold each bell, but we've just got a stub of it there, and it's actually been pulled away whole. So the loathsome child hasn't just taken the bell, they've taken a little bit of the mounting as well. Now, that's what these whistles were for. These rattles and cum whistles were for. They were to amuse children. Children stuck them in their mouths and devoured them. And actually, in some very sad instances, won't make light of this, children were known to sort of choke on these bells. So they weren't terribly safe, to be perfectly honest. But they get a bit of use and abuse. Now, On many that you see, and take it from me, many that you see, these will have all been repaired. They will have had new brackets made. That's only a loop of wire. You make a little loop of wire. You make the bell. The bells are more complicated to make. They are quite specialist things. You know, it's all sheet silver. Here's one bell. You can see where the child has sort of mangled off a little bit of it. And then, of course, the whistle part, which is just begging to be put in your mouth anyway, is absolutely bedecked with teeth marks, little sort of Georgian children's teeth gnawing away on the end of that. Not as bad as some. Some of them, I mean, I don't know what they were feeding these kids. Some of these little ones, they bit straight through the bloody things. I mean, ferocious little beasts. I would say the most important part of this for me is this is how it has come down through history. A child has pulled a bell off. Fine, they've pulled a bell off. Nobody's fettled it. Nobody's tried to tart it up or titivate it. That's an honest thing that's happened to it. Another child, or maybe the same voracious child, silver-consuming child, has gnawed the tip of it 250 years ago, and those dents have been left in because why would you take them out? You'd only take them out, actually, if you were selling it to a collector and wanted it in tip-top condition. And this is the other thing about finding things in original state. They're honest, they're historic, but they're not terribly expensive. One of these, and I have one of these in perfect condition, I'm going to show you in a moment. One of these in perfect condition, if you can really genuinely find one in perfect condition, and believe me, 90% of them will have been repaired cleverly or clumsily at some stage. They're very expensive things. This, although it was a bargain, even with these little bits missing, this is still a reasonably valuable thing. This was less than the cost of buying me and my father a fish and chip supper, which is, for something which is assayed, they're always marked, the early ones are always marked here, normally with just a maker's mark, in this case RN for Richard Norman, who was a small worker. And this actually dates this a little bit later than I would think. Normally of this style, they're about 1745, 1750, but Norman wasn't free until 1757. So it's sensible to say that this is circa 1760. The later Victorian ones that are made in Birmingham, this is London made. Most of the ones you see will be London made from the 18th century. When you get into the 19th century, Birmingham, somewhat, they're still made in London. Phipps and Robinson, Rawlings and Summers, they will make them. They're specialists in making them. But a lot of them will be made in Birmingham. The Birmingham ones will be marked here. And largely because the Birmingham ones are fully marked. And then as the Birmingham ones are fully marked, then the London ones start to be fully marked, and then they're marked here. So when you see a mark here, that's a good sign. Although, in the last 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years, modern reproductions of these have been made that are struck 800 on the lip here. And they're quite convincing looking, but they don't have a proper maker's mark there. So that was the discovery. And I think, you know, you could spend £150 on that, having that little bell and bracket made and having that dent taken out, maybe a couple of £100 now, and then it would be worth maybe £800, £900, £1,000. Or, and I'm a huge advocate of this, you can look at something as an historic object, and you can understand all the reasons why these things have happened. In fact, it's inevitable that they will have happened to something like this, because it's given to teething children. And actually, that's the point of it. And so you can see where that bell's come away and where those teeth marks are, and it will relate you to a child that was alive, 250 years ago, 260 years ago. And maybe we shouldn't discard the marks of history on objects quite as casually as we do to sort of to make a pound, and also to there are a lot of collectors that only want perfect things. They only want perfect things that are 300 years old. And really and truly, they don't buy perfect things. They buy things that have been made perfect. And they don't realise it by very clever furniture restorers or silversmiths or ceramic restorers or what have you. So the quest for perfection can often be a double-edged sword. Now I've said that, I'm going to show you a perfect one. This is something I've had for 20 years maybe, and it was bought in the southwest of England in a little sale, completely out of the way. And this had come, I found from the auctioneer, straight out of a sort of a very nice gentleman's country house in the region, and I don't think it had ever been used. Now this is, to all intents and purposes, the same thing, but it is also entirely different. A little bit earlier in date with all this Rococo chasing. This is by Sandilands Drinkwater. Again, you'll see Sandilands Drinkwater's mark on a lot of these better quality rattles. The amazing thing about this one is chased. So they're similar form. They have this sort of octagonal body and the flute coming down and the piece of coral. The coral is important as well, because you do want an original full piece of coral if you can get it. Often the ends snap off, and that's quite difficult to match and find, because each one of these collars, because each piece of coral is different and irregular when it was worked, each one of these mounts fits a particular piece of coral. So you do see replacements of these, but either the coral is too thick, so they've had to push this mounting out and it sort of bulges, or often the ways it's actually too thin, so then this pinches round and this all looks rather mean and thin. But that's what impressed me about this as well. These are both original pieces of 18th century coral set into them, which is again rare. But this, I mean, I say it's bells and whistles. Well, it is bells and whistles. This whistle, I have cleaned this. This might work. That works a little bit better. Each one of the bells, it's the same form of bell and bracket as this, only these have all been chased. And these are all original, and the entire thing, and I don't know how it survived for sort of 260, 270 years. It can't have been given to a child, or it was, it was allowed to be used for a portrait and then put away, or possibly even infant mortality rates being what they were in the 18th century. It was purchased for a child. The child didn't make it, and it was simply put away as a beloved keepsake. But that is immaculate. And you will look for a long time in the antique shops of America and England, Britain, I should say. I don't want to exclude everywhere else, to find a perfect example. But this, admittedly, I bought it a long time and I bought it very well. So I did that thing I normally do, obnoxious me, of finding a bargain. But on the open market, this would certainly be £1,500 or more. This, with its small faults, but basically of nearly the same period as this, the price of 2 chip suppers. There is an advantage if you're collecting on a budget to look for imperfect objects. They probably won't appreciate in the same way that perfect ones do, but you should not be buying antiques for investment. I know antique dealers that have bought things that are now worth a quarter of what they paid for them. They buy them because they love them. They don't buy them to make money. And if you're collecting, you should be buying things that you love, that you can look on a daily basis and get tremendous enjoyment from. As I will from this, I will, I will look at this and I will go, unless somebody makes me a slightly tempting offer for it, I am built that way. But I'll get joy from owning this. And if in 20 years, that I should live that long, if in 20 years that's worth what I paid for it, that's fine. I've had all the enjoyment out of it. How much is your car going to be worth in 20 years' time that you've just bought? Or your settee, or your carpet, or your new windows, or your new kitchen? Will they last 20 years and be worth anything? No, they won't. So you shouldn't make the same application towards antiques. But neither should you be endlessly searching for perfection. It's lovely to find perfect things. It really is. I mean, I can remember all those years ago being thrilled to bits with this, and still am. But you have to understand it's going to be really and truly, hand on heart, it's going to be once in a blue moon. And if you go to, and I know a lot of you do, go to dealers where everything they have is perfect, everything is untouched, and has all the original engraving and all, absolutely mint. How do they do it? Well, they have a little man held hostage in a small workshop with hammers and chisels and fires and goodness knows what, but that's how it's done. Much better to buy something honest like this. This has never been touched in its life in 250 years. I mean, okay, it's got a bell missing and it's got teeth marks in it, but it's survived. And I think probably now that we're reappraising antiques and looking at them possibly a bit more for the history than we used to, we appreciate it more. So that's a little just fueled by finding that rattle so affordably that I couldn't quite believe it. The benefits of buying the imperfect. So that's enough from me. I've gone on quite long enough. I do apologise if I've gone on. And until next week, goodbye and good antiques hunting.